See if Joe knows this.
See not only friends and family of Linden Place here, but relatives and cousins, and it's a good gathering. Karen McGinnis, thank you for helping host this. Joe, thank you so much. David Weed here from SOAM's project. I'm going to be videotaping because of the treatment this poem gives to the Pokanoket is fairly remarkable, and as we'll see, get into the verbiage. Marty Reynolds, thank you for being here again. Marty helped us a lot when we were first gifting portraits to Linden Place, and plays a big role here. And the Lowe's and Steele family, nice to see cousins represented here as well. By way of background, this poem was written in 1880 and appeared in this book here, the Bicentennial of Bristol, Rhode Island. I don't know if any of you have seen this book. I've seen it nowhere else. I don't think the Historical Society even has a copy. We've got two that came down through our family. 1680 to 1880 was the Bicentennial 200th anniversary of Bristol, Rhode Island, and they had quite a celebration. As a matter of fact, the description of Linden Place, LeBaron Colt was living here at the time, and he had quite, the whole facade was decorated with banners, and it's quite a description if you want to take the time to read it in the book. And it sort of reminds me of the 4th of July. As a matter of fact, as we look at some of the images in here, it'll bring the 4th of July right into your eyes. The family tree, if you look at that in the middle of your book, the center spread, this is only half of the family tree from George Howe's Mount Hope. Many of you are familiar with this. This is the top half. The bottom half of it is just as big. You know that Mark Anthony DeWolf and Abigail Potter had 15 kids from their marriage in 1744. And if you go down, number 19 is Abigail. Abigail married Pearlie Howe. That's how the Howes were introduced to the DeWolf family. I have to say that one of my former relatives, Alice DeWolf Pardee, any of you remember her? She was the one who founded the art museum here, and she was quite a historian herself and a writer, and she knew the families quite well, and she always said that the Howes were much nicer people than the DeWolfs. So there are these two families that are sort of mixed together here. Abigail goes down, and then you see John Squire Howe. I think he bought Weedamo in that farm area from Norwest John DeWolf. Remember the circumnavigated the globe and then married Mary Melville. He farmed for a while out there. He didn't take to farming much, moved up back to Boston and sold it to John Squire Howe. And then it went down to Mark Anthony DeWolf Howe, who was the bishop, the fellow we see on the front of this program with his family. And as you can see, he had 18 children and 31 grandchildren, which is pretty good for an Episcopal bishop. Of those 18 children, one of them was my great-grandfather, and the Lowe's and Steele's great-grandfather. And then the 31 grandchildren included my grandmother Edith Howe, and I don't know, Billy and Kathy, can you pick out in the photo who's Aunt Amy or the others? But they're all right there in that family. I think my grandmother Edith is on the back of the page. On the back page, the one in the white dress, just to the right of the gal who's real short in white dress. And that's her father, Herbert Marshall Howe, just to her right. And her brother, who died at an early age, John Fell Howe, is standing against the bush in the back. He's the second from the left. And I based this at 1888 simply because John Fell Howe died when he was 20. And in this picture, he looks about 12. So, and he died at the year 1895, the same year that his grandfather died. The bishop and his grandson died the very same year, 1895. The bishop was 72 when he wrote this poem. He died at the age of 87. Bristol's population at the time was about 6,000. This was only 15 years after the end of the Civil War, so that was still all abuzz in the air, 1865 to 1880. And then they had King Philip's Day was in 1876, so the 200th anniversary in 1880 was only, see, the 200th anniversary of the King Philip's Day was 1676 was when the war ended, David. And then, so 200 years later, 1876, they celebrated King Philip's Day. I don't think that's observed anymore, is it? No. Then in 1880, Rhode Island legislators passed the detribalization law. Have any of you heard of that? The detribalization law, which basically did away with all the tribes, eliminating any tribal authority except for 2 acres of land that were preserved down in Narragansett, David. And all the rest of it was promptly sold, or it prompted the sale of all the tribal lands. Again, not federally recognized until 1983, the Narragansetts, that is. Then Manifest Destiny was alive and well in that era. And how many of you know about Manifest Destiny? It's not that well known. I didn't know that about it until I started reading this poem a little bit more. Pass these around. This is an image of Manifest Destiny. The concept came out of the election of 1844 election. And the idea was, it was manifest, it was obvious and certain that the U.S. is destined to expand its dominion. It was a kind of higher law that everyone seems to agree to, that it was a divinely ordained right for us to come to this country and take it over from the Native Americans. And both this fellow here dives right into it because he was living in it, but it was created also partly by John Winthrop before he even came over here, quite a ways before that, and preaching a sermon that's well known as the City on the Hill. Have you heard about the City on the Hill sermon that he gave? That was in, let's see, what was that? 1630. John Winthrop, another relative I have to worry about. City on the Hill sermon setting a shining example of what we could be, this glorious thing in the future. If we would just go over to America, seize the land, and make it ours, there would be this beautiful God-given city shining on the hill. Shining example to all of us. So, going back to the poem itself, at the beginning, as I go through it, if you want to interrupt me and ask a question or toss something in, please feel free to do that. Otherwise, we'll move through this pretty quickly. He starts out, I guess the assignment was tell the history of Bristol, Rhode Island. Here we are, we've been here 200 years, now we have to celebrate our history, tell our history. But watch the dichotomy between celebrating that history and then giving deference to the Native Americans at the same time, right in the middle of Manifest Destiny. It's a tough balancing act that this preacher has to do. When life was fresh, and maybe we could say that's before the Civil War, when there was some innocence, and the pulse beat full and strong, free fancies came and wove themselves in song. But age has checked the currents of the heart, and care constrained its daydreams to depart. So the typical convention was to sort of start with an apology. He wasn't a great poet. He was more an oratory speaker than a poet or a writer. But he does participate in the conventions. The chorus unstrung, which once attuned my lyre, the hand its skill has lost, the soul its fire. If the broken shell lies voiceless on the shore, the fickle muses heed my suit no more. So my creativity is sort of stifled. There was an age of innocence, but now here I am in old age. So offering an apology right at the very beginning, which was one of the traditions. And yet I strive, by simple force of will, with quavering voice to chant in numbers still. For 'tis a gala day, joy rules the hour. Young men and maids from happy homes outpour. Their hastening feet trip light upon the green, and music lends enchantment to the scene. So now we're celebrating the 200th. You'll get these feelings on the same thing on the 4th of July, when everyone comes out of their houses. From distant marts and climes beyond the main, the wandering exiles childhood's haunts regain, to glad thanksgiving round the ancestral board. The living generations sit restored. They come to greet the mother of us all. Who do you think the mother of us all is? Bristol. She personified as our mother. And so there's real glorification of her in not a paternalistic, but maternalistic way. Whose bonds of love our willing hearts enthrall, whose years by centuries may now be told. So we personified her. We've made Bristol a woman. While spot nor wrinkle shows that she is old, more fruit in age her vigor still brings forth, and spreads her teeming offspring south and north. Today each filial heart its tribute brings, and at her feet the roseate garland flings. And witness, stiffened age attempts to glean its withered chaplet. Fields no longer green supply autumnal flowers in colors gay, fragrant no more like blossoms of the May. So there's a regeneration going on. Some of the language is tough to sort of figure out, but I think you just let the words wash over you. You get the idea that there was a time when things weren't so great, but if you keep that optimism and you idealize your view of Bristol, the flowers around will do the rest for you. There's a regeneration going on. Sauntering along this ancient town, its tasteful homes, its busy streets, its cross-crowned turrets shadowing down, its seaboard girt with white-sailed fleets. This reminds me of Wallace Howe, another one of the Howes, who created an awful lot of the architecture here in town. The Armory down on the waterfront, the Wallace Howe Armory in 1894, the Guterres School, St. Martin's Church in Providence, and our YMCA here all have the images that I see there. We dream not of their bold emprise, their enterprise, who here 2 centuries agone saw forest clad with prescient eyes the choicest spot for home's hearthstone. We dream not, we don't think about the first ones who were here. And who were they? 4 stalwart men. We know who they are? Byfield, Wally, Burton, and Oliver. 4 stalwart men, alike prepared to quell the foe or till the ground. Heroic dames their fortunes shared, their wives. Amid these wild a refuge found. So here the 4 original founders came into this wild, not desolate, but filled with Native Americans. They felled the wood, the log house piled, they burned the bramble from the sod, and sense of loneliness beguiled with research in the book of God. So they passed the time away nicely, and if they didn't have anything to pass the time, they read the book, but with research in the book, sort of a clinical approach to the Bible there, this use of the word research. The stealthy wolves from jungles swoop and howl about their cots at night, or wakened by the Indian's whoop, they see the torch's lurid light. So sort of there's the savage again. It was okay in those days to use the word savage. That was colloquial. The snow 4 times the vales had filled. This is 4 years since 1676 to to the end of King Philip's War. 4 summer suns dissolved the frost. So here, Bristol, founded in 1660, was 1676, only 4 years. Am I doing my math right there?
1680.
1680, I'm sorry. Yeah, 1680. Since the great Metacom was killed, his braves dispersed, his fastness lost, fastness meaning his hold on things. The treacherous savage, fierce with hate, sought vengeance for his people's wrong, skulking where once with pride elate he strode the sunlit heath along. Do we have empathy for King Philip right there? Not really. He's painted as quite the savage. Watching to light the vengeful fires, to steal the wife, to slay the child. Ouch. Such were the foes our gallant sires encountered in the forest wild. This is what our forefathers put up with. Where we, their sons, luxuriate in homes with peace and plenty stored, they wrestled with beleaguered fate, armed with the plowshare and the sword. So we have it easy these days, 1880. Just think of these first 4. They didn't have it that way at all. Now we have a new format. Alas, for that evanished race that once pursued the eager chase along these hills and dales, o'er the tide with light canoe, clave the white-crested billows through, now spangled thick with sails. There was a day they were all canoes. Now it's all sailboats. So from the Pokanoket to the colonists, the Brits. Born to this princely heritage, they sojourned here from age to age. Who knoweth whence they sprung? Though errant as the winds they roam, their hunting grounds to them were home. To these dear haunts they clung. Now we sense some empathy going on there. This was their homeland. They were immigrants themselves. Who knows where they came from? Relics of their heroic sires, withheld from the funeral fires which wrapped far India's dead, are as waiting warriors calmly rest in all their savage armor dressed with trophies rich bestead. Again, it's a noble picture of how, even in death, they don't have funeral fires. They withheld them from the funeral fires, as is the custom in India. But their relics are still richly bestowed upon them. And dear to them they honored dust, as where in Christian hope and trust we lay our dead to sleep, sacred until the white man came to obliterate their tribal name, their souls in grief to steep. The white man used these sacred grounds for their own burials. When tempest-tossed, the pilgrim stood on the cold margin of the flood seashore. The Indian grasped his hand, bade him to rove the seas no more, but bring his treasures to the shore and share the rugged land. So when we first came, the whites first came, we were well received. And we had that 50-year period of peace because they asked us to share the land. Look at the empathy there. But soon, before the favoring breeze, came other laden argosies. This is the rest of the people that came after. So the original folks were they were okay, as the ones who came later on really messed things up. Astir with Saxon bands, invaders on the shore grew bold as waves on waves successive rolled, o'er spreads with shelving sands. Victims of violated troth, now they're oppressed. The Indian chiefs with vengeance wrought, uprose to stay the flood. Where'er the intruder chose his way, the savage hordes in ambush lay, and deluged him in blood. Not much empathy there. So then now they're back to the savages. So this little dance back and forth between showing empathy for them on one hand, but on the other, they're savages killing our babies. the pebbles on the shore cannot repel the sea's uproar. So there's this analogy between pebbles on the shore not being able to withstand these waves that have come ashore from across the Atlantic. Though countless as the stars, the feathered shaft, the uncertain bow, are powerless against the steel-clad foe in panoply of Mars. Arrows against guns doesn't work. In panoply of Mars, an impressive display of the god Mars, the god of war. Vanquished in fight, yet undismayed, in a yet deeper Everglade. This is probably the Everglades of Mount Hope, the swamp areas. The sachem found retreat. There, plumed again his savage horde, he put feathers in his folks' head, and from his lair in wrath outpoured the unguarded host to meet. So King Philip gathered his forces around Mount Hope, put feathers in their heads, and they all took off to war. At length, the chief, by foes sore pressed, here at his mountain home sought rest. So there he's gone, all the way through New England, touched into Vermont, New York State, and come back in 2 lines of the poem. At length, the chief, here at his mountain home, sought rest, in council with his braves. In front, before, the bog with brambles grown defies approach like a wall of stone. Behind, the ocean laves. So he's well defended. He's got this bog, this swamp in front of him, and he's got Mount Hope Bay behind him. So he's well defended. Is he? Not well enough. In order, round his rocky throne, there's King Philip's chair, high canopied with vine-clad stone. If you go there now, it's got a canopy of growth all over it. And, matter of fact, there is a move underway. We're going to help the Pokanoket clear that land out, expose that rock a little bit more the way it was in its day. That's in the making. The solemn conclave meet. So here's King Philip's group. The spring from, and that's out, not our, the spring from out whose limpid edge they quaff in nature's wine their pledge, flows placid as his feet. There's the spring, the water at Mount Hope. And it's like a communion, drinking that water out of the spring of Mount Hope. Is they quaff in nature's wine their pledge. It's almost like a religious communion. Alone upon the mountain's head, where woods and plains and seats outpoured in beauteous prospect lie, the sentry stands with search intent, graven on every lineament and flashing from his eyes. So here's the sentry on the top of Mount Hope, looking out, protecting his troops down below. And who's coming up the bay to get him? Benjamin Church, right? Like you can sort of hear it coming as you read the poem. But here's the sentry all by himself. And etched in his face, you see this graven on every lineament and flashing from his eyes. There's a real personality there of being on the lookout, being wary, being vigilant. But there's a personality there. It's not just another savage. He sees the hostile scouts afar. Here comes Benjamin Church. The heralds of advancing war, stretching from shore to shore. Well, did he see them coming like that? Where's there a sentry? This is the only place I've ever read where there was a sentry that saw Benjamin Church and his soldiers coming up from the Scott River. Has anyone ever heard that version before? I think it only exists in this poem. And why would it only exist in this poem and not elsewhere, and not in the real history books? What is Bishop Howe trying to do here? To say that maybe our sneak attack, the way it really was, wasn't as noble as he'd like to have it be? that it's a little more noble if you have a sentry there who sees them coming. Watch what happens here, because this is a little bit different than the history as I've understood it, as most of us have. The scouts afar, the heralds of advancing war, stretching from shore to shore, the serpent's coil in deadly ring. Now, the white man's the devil. The doomed chiefs encompassing to crush them evermore. It's more rhetorical than actual what's going on here. I think the bishop's just trying to create a mood that really didn't exist at this point. At this point, it was sheer surprise, right? Instant adown the dizzy steep, more swift than startled reindeer leap, the faithful sentry sped. So he saw them coming, comes running down the hill to sound the alarm. His hurrying step the chieftains heard, nor paused to catch the warning word. To the deep thicket fled. They didn't even wait to hear from him. They saw him running down. They knew they were in trouble, so they all scattered for the thicket. In the black mire immersed they lay, they hide in the swamp, eluding then the fierce foray, each in his grim retreat. But the keen huntsman knew his game. Benjamin Church was a keen huntsman. He knew how to hunt the Native Americans. He knew where they would go. He knew they would run into the swamp. In all the books you read on King Philip's War, they always retreat into the swamp. And Benjamin Church knew that. But the keen huntsman knew his game. Descendants bear his honored name in this his chosen seat, King Philip's chair. He lingered through the livelong night, till, passed away their wild affright, they lit the wigwam fire, brought forth their scanty stores forlorn, all in the twilight of the morn, to sate their hunger dire. Now, this is also a new version of what happened. The guy runs down the hill to warn everybody. They go off and hide, but then nothing happens. They look around and go, oh, I guess he's not here. They go through the night, then they get up in the morning, and they light the fire, and they bring out their whatever food they have, and in the morning they're eating breakfast. Is that the way it really happened? I don't think so. Well, then track them to the tangled fen, as beasts are baited in their den. This is Church again, tracking them to the swamp. And set his marksmen round, and one in that fierce hunt took part, with vengeful hand and traitorous heart, a Wampanoag hound. You know who that is? Remember, who killed Metacon? Who killed
Alderman.
Alderman, one of his own. One of his own was upset that King Philip had killed his brother because he wanted to make peace, I guess. He wanted to stop the fight. And King Philip would have none of it. Killed him on the spot. And his brother, Alderman, said, that's it, I'm out of here. Went down and told Benjamin Church where they were. And so it was, at least as the story goes, Alderman was the one who killed King Philip, which is poetic justice, revenge for the killing of your own brother. Did it really happen that way? Do we know that as fact? It's poetic justice, and it's stayed alive in the history books. But I've always wondered that. Was it really Alderman gave the death blow? A Wampanoag hound, Alderman is called. His recreant arm, his cowardly arm, the death shot sped, brought to the dust that royal head, this peerless Metacon. Peerless, unequal, so even in death, somewhat proud. The last and foremost of his race, where erst he sought a resting place, our fathers found a home. There it is, all in 2 lines. Sad but true, that where formerly he wanted his own resting place, this is where we found a home. Not him. Doubtless, it was the will of heaven. Here's your manifest destiny. This was God willed. That o'er the coasts where once was given welcome to pilgrim band, their sons as forest leaves are strewn, should spread assuming as their own dominion of the land. We are like leaves. It's a natural thing falling out of the trees. It's just as natural as that for us to take over this country. It's nature's work. They brought intelligence and skill. And here, they pass around the pictures of Manifest Destiny. Yeah, you can see in those pictures I passed around. They brought intelligence and skill. The picture of Columbia, she's floating through the air. She's got a book. So we're going to bring education. And in the background are trains, railroads, stagecoaches, all the advancements of civilization, farming, and the big city in the background, while on the left-hand side, the Native Americans are all being pushed to the west. They brought intelligence and skill, the seas to span, the earth to till, to wave the magic rod, transforming quick the desert wild to home, for heaven's elected child, a paradise of God. There's the shining city on the hill. Yet lives there one with heart so sear. Is there still alive? Is there somebody who has a heart dry enough that from his stony eyes no tear on Indian graves may fall? Are we heartless? Are we all heartless at this point? So there he is calling into question manifest destiny, perhaps. No pity for an outcast race, upon whose camping ground, through grace, we hold our festival. It's God's grace that we're able to celebrate the 200 years. Mother Bristol, that camping ground. With foothold on the Atlantic strand, the Britons strove on every hand, new conquests to secure. The Indian tribes were backward born, still struggling with their fate forlorn, still fated to endure. Now they're the victims. They're being pushed to the west. O'er stream and mountaintop afar, pursued by unrelenting war, they took their westward way, still following the setting sun. The remnant of the race march on to the oblivious sea. How noble are they at that point? Not very noble. Pretty well vanquished. Of course, this was the time of the Louisiana Purchase, Oregon, the fight in Mexico. I mean, there's a lot going on in the West at this time. Swiftly, the tide of time has run, since from this coast to Oregon, the red man ruled the land. And it should be say, not stay. Say, if 2 centuries more will leave one living representative before our sons to stand. In 2 centuries more, in 2080, will there be any Native Americans left? Good question. Now, look at this huge flashback from this point here. Here in dim days of yore, 6 centuries before, we're going back 600 years, so 1280, 1200 before, Saxons sailed these waters o'er, Norsemen found haven. Tread we historic ground, where on the shores around, records of them are found on the rock graven. There's your Mount Hope Bay rock, and Dighton Rock with the inscriptions on them, all part of our history. Whether it's accurate or not is still in question, but it's certainly part of the history. From the bleak Norway coast, soon in gray twilight lost on the seas, tempest tossed, launched the bold seamen. Fear in each bosom slept, forth from the strand they swept, while on the shore there wept children and women. So these are the Norsemen, the very first ones that came over here. It was cold, it was scary at that time. The Nordic women, mostly left behind, some went along. 'Neath the cold polar star, mount they the waves afar, as on triumphal ear rides the proud hero. Who is the proud hero? Remember the Nordic hero? Down from the crystal seas sweeps the chill northern breeze, frosts on the voyager seas, cold below zero. This is the North Atlantic. Still on their westward way, lit by pale astral ray, o'er the wild waste they stray, groping for Greenland. I love that line, groping for Greenland. Back in the news these days. Veered by the polar wind, down these coasts, forest lined, here clustering grapes they find, named the shore Vinland. There's Newfoundland, Newport, the vineyards they found. Skirting this shining bay, vines spread their rich array. Neath them, his roundelay sang the gay sailor. His roundelay, his shanty, this gay sailor singing over the biting frost, o'er the seas tempest-tossed, o'er the stern rock-bound coast, sang the Prevailer. So sang the gay sailor, sang the Prevailer. They're happy when they first came here, in their own frozen way. Who neath the circling sun hath their bold voyage outdone? Brave 151, Thorfinn their Viking. Here's the hero. How many of you have heard of Thorfinn before? He is a small character in our history, but in the history of the Vikings, he was the first one here from Iceland in, 1010, ways back. He with that corsair crew o'er the far winter's blue, Gudrid, the princess drew, maid of his liking. That was his wife, Gudrid. And these are two real characters who actually lived. Under his own roof tree, sped the time cheerily. In the dark forest, she, heart's trough unbroken, on her breast undefiled, bore the lone Norseman child, flower of the desert wild, love's precious token. You know who that is? They had one child, and they were here. It was the only child, and I think the first child and the only child born of the Norse when they were here. Snorri, or Snor, S-N-O-R-R-E, was the child, S-N-O-R-R-U-C-E, or S-N-O-R-R-I. You see two variant spellings. Thrice had the pallid sun stooped o'er the southern zone, so after 3 years only. Thrice from his height shed down summer's soft burning, when, tired of scraling strife, this is what the Norse called the indigenous, they called them scralings. Tired of the scraling strife, weary of exile life, Norsemen mid-perils rife, launch forth returning. They go home. Yet o'er the Arctic main, ships came and went again, crossing in proud disdain, seas that dissever our Vinland's balmy clime from Iceland's mantling rime, the sea that separates our beautiful wine groves from their coat of ice, their mantling rime. But since that primal time, on this coast maritime, Norsemen dwelt never. So no more Nordics, but another slice of Bristol's history. So he's looking back before the Native Americans to try and give it a little wider scope here. Let's see why. A new verse form. So has it fared from age to age. Race has supplanted race. New names are written on history's page. The new and old replace. So even without manifest destiny, before manifest destiny, let's say, races moved in and out. One race has supplanted another. So is he trying to justify the manifest destiny by saying this has always happened? Perhaps he's just giving it the broader look, leaving it to you to decide. Into the cities Canaan stored, the ruthless Hebrews came. The Turk now holds them by the sword in false Mohammed's name. So here's other colonialists from the Bible, the ruthless Hebrews, now the Turks took them over. Etruscan soil, imperial Rome, with power and wealth overspread. The Goths despoiled the lofty dome, the crown from Caesar's head. The Roman Empire was taken over. The Goths took them over too. They came and went. Saxons and Normans trod in turn Britannia's sea-girt shore. The Druids gone, their altars burn, with mystic fires no more. Under the crust of present life, a buried past lies hid. as 'neath fair fields with verdure rife, the cities of the dead. So one civilization on top of the other. It's a natural process. We dream that we have reached the goal. We think we're there. For man's achievement set, and scout the thought that a long royal of nations follows yet. You know the expression, scout the thought? Do away with the thought. Reject it. We want to reject the thought that there are more nations to come. We've achieved it. We're there right now. That's what he's trying to push. May there not rise some nobler stock to stand where we have stood, to leave memorials on the rock of still transcendent good. Now, this is one of those lines that I keep coming back to. To leave memorials on the rock of still transcendent good. We're going to are there any of those among us who can leave memorials that make us look back and achieve some kind of transcendent good from it? Or every time we look back on this, do we have to rue what happened? It's a call for a more noble future. May there not rise some nobler stock to touch the harmonies that wait in nature's depth concealed, till science shall reverberate religion's truth revealed. So can we find a unified future, a common ground? Do we have answers to all our questions? To know no law save that of love, the law that rules in heaven, to glow in sunlight from above, through Christ's effulgence given. So, redemption, there's God's grace. We know that. We still question whether that's going to last. Is that going to carry us through? Is that radiance, that effulgence, is that going to last? To stand in pristine form restored, godlike in soul and mien, at set of sun to meet the Lord as friends meet on the green. Are we going to be able to make this a human and natural resolution here? Can we justify our stand here as human and natural? So again, calling into question all our rights of being here. The heroes of the golden age, no pen may now portray. We may not read the unwritten page. I chant a humbler lay. No writer can predict the future. We're all flawed. I chant a humbler lay. I'm more humble. Dear shrine of my heart, now we're back to Bristol. Bristol is the shrine of his heart. Dear shrine of my heart, bright realm of my childhood, there's innocence there. Where through the long vista my memory strays, the shells on the beach, the flowers in the wildwood, the boat on the billow bring youth's halcyon days. All these memories of Bristol, I mean, you can see and feel Bristol in those lines. Unknown to the nations that yond the broad ocean, in peace or in conflict, long ages have passed, till, bent on adventure, with saint-like devotion, this fair land the Norsemen discovered at last. Before all we knew, this went on. Here flowed the free rivers, the primeval forest, o'er the valleys and mountains its banner unfurled, till voyagers who sought from their wandering no rest opened the gates of a continent wide to the world. There's just a recap of what he's just been through. We've been through all of this history, now we're back to the beginning. He's going to bring us back. The first sail was furled, the first anchor let fall. Rebuke not the pride in our bosoms now swelling, that we live on the shores most historic of all. Don't scold us for our pride. We're proud of being here. We shouldn't be scolded for that. No sprite of the Indian, no wraith of the Norseman. So no Indian spirit, no faint trace of the Norseman confronts us in darkness or vexes our sleep. We don't lose any sleep over these troubles that came before us. He's trying to put everybody at ease now after shaking them up with this poem. We trust in the God whose chariots and horsemen encompass the prophet on Dothan's dark steep. There's a reference to Elijah's old Hebrew city protecting him, the same way we trust in God to protect us here in Bristol. By the arm of the Lord, we rest in these borders, pioneers of religion, advancement, and right. The dominion is ours, while, true to our orders, we fulfill our errand and walk in the light. There's manifest destiny, unbridled manifest destiny. See signs of his presence, God's presence, where erst before the bold Briton drave out the rude savage and planted his home, the dwellings, the churches, the common we meet, is the town common. The raiment we wear and the fields that we roam, these are our institutions in Bristol. We want to keep these institutions. King Philip again, on the crest of his mountain. So at the peak of bringing back Bristol in all its glory, he flashes back to King Philip. King Philip again on the crest of his mountain. There's noble King Philip, even at the end. Surveying the realm he commanded of yore, he might see the broad bay. He might drink from his fountain. All else he once looked on would greet him no more. So if his spirit is up there looking down, it once was his, but not anymore. So this noble man, again, reduced to nothing in 4 lines. To poets of old, the rare instinct was given to forecast the future, portray it in song. Poets generally are given the task of being able to tell the future. To your rhymester, meaning himself, alas, less favored of heaven, just the shades of the past and the present belong. I just know about the past and the present. I don't know anything about the future. So sort of, don't ask me where this is going to go. He's going to leave it up to us. What glories may crown this fair spot by the sea, when the dial of time shows a century more? I wist not, I care not, since never to me can it boast of a luster it wore not before. Bristol can't be any better than it is right now. Whatever it was, it can't boast of a luster that it wore not before. Could the men and the beasts and the trees of the wood, once spellbound by Orpheus, be held by the poet? No scenes should be changed, no newfangler intrude. He could crystallize Bristol just as we know it. I love rhyming poet and know it there. I love that. There's no way that you can change, as a poet, there's no way you can change how good Bristol is. Its beauty is permanent. Poet can't make it any better. No rock should be smitten, no landmark removed. The gray moss on the walls, green sedge on the shore, all should remain in the guise we have loved. Mementos of Eden preserved evermore. This is heaven on earth. Bristol is heaven on earth. Generations that crowd on our footsteps, all hail! Here's his toast. He finally gets to the end. He says, let's toast Bristol. Generations that crowd on our footsteps. There's the 4th of July for you. We vacate the homestead. We go outside. Our leasehold expires. If our counsels may guide or our prayers may prevail, you'll on the old hearths keep alive the old fires. If you're wise, you'll keep these traditions going. Montauk, and here's Montauk is Mount Hope, right? Montauk personified here is Mount Hope. Montauk looketh down on a landscape serene. So Mount Hope personified, looking down around it. 'Tis a garden the master entrusts to your care. We're the stewards now. Your art may embellish, yet not supervene, this perfection of nature in earth, sea, and air. Your art, the poet's art, perhaps, you can embellish it, but you can't change it. It's perfect, this perfection of nature in earth, sea, and air. The stream from Helicon runs low. Here's another one of the conventions at the time. He's going to say, I've done it all. I've run out of juices. I've got to say goodbye. My poetic inspiration is gone. The stream from Helicon runs low. The winged horse is jaded now. There's Pegasus, the symbol of inspiration of poetic genius. The sisters 9, there's your 9 creative sisters, have tripped away and left me halting and astray. I'm human. I'm frail. Frailty takes over at the end. Folding his wings on life's far shore, the cygnet dies and sings no more. The cygnet is the swan. So the swan song at the end, this is just a convention, a way of tuning out, saying goodbye. We're all frail. No matter how lordly I sounded, I'm still a human being. That was to lose the muse at the end. It takes us back to the beginning where he talks about how he's just a human being. Well, what do you think? How does he treat the Native Americans? Is there respect there in the middle of this convention of manifest destiny? Is he kinder to the Native Americans than you think? Should he be less celebratory? I think he celebrates Bristol about as much as you can, calling it heaven on earth here, Eden, a God-given place that we live in. Do we have those feelings at the 4th of July here in town? How far afield is this from today's sentiments? Anybody? Do you think he leaves the question in the air, or does he come down on one side or the other?
Because it seems like at some point he is, but then in another passage he doesn't seem so.
Yeah, he does go back and forth, doesn't he?
Yes.
It sort of leaves it to us to make up our minds, right?
Well, I'm just saying the same thing there. I mean, a poet can tease you as he's musing about his own age and his own frailties, but he's at the same time telling a story that he goes in and out and offers through that. I mean, he's trying to celebrate Bristol, at the same time sort of praise the past and examine the past. That's what he's doing. So he's trying to be objective at times, but every now and then he is a reverend, right? So he's showing his religious spirituality, and so he is seesawing back and forth, and he is, I guess, leaving it at the end.
Yeah.
And there's more to come. I mean, I'm looking at somebody who could probably write some more.
Yeah. Well, I'll tell you, and his footnotes in the end, the last 2 pages,
Yeah.
you look at that, you see he's a student of the history in a way.
Yeah.
Almost more than he needs to be in the poem. I mean, the huge footnotes at the end, they were part of the poem. He thinks it's necessary to take the time to stop and explain that. I think you can also see how he was more of an orator than a writer. You notice it, I can feel his voice when I'm reading it. He was quite a fellow on the podium or in the pulpit. But not such a great writer. As a poet, if you've read much Victorian poetry, he's challenged to compete with the great Victorians, but he does the inverted syntax, he does use all the stylistic conventions. Anything else? Other comments? Yeah.
Could you go over again what you were saying, what is it, the manifest destiny? Who started that again, and how did that?
Good question. I'm just learning about it myself. This painting, you see this artwork here, right?
Yeah.
This was John Gast's painting. And where did I write down? Let's see. This is Columbia, the female personification of the USA. And let's see. Manifest Destiny, the 1844 election. I'm not sure who the candidates were.
Jacksonian.
Jacksonian. Okay, can you enlighten us on how that worked its way
I
into?
really can't, I'm not a historian, but
Yeah,
I think the Louisiana Purchase was 1804 or 1803, and Jackson is even, quite a bit later, but he really pushed, I think, manifestos.
David, you had some comments earlier about manifestos.
Just the same thing, that with the Louisiana Purchase, the country had opened up and it was all laid out before them.
Yeah.
Of course, there was no consideration of the millions of people who've been living there for generations, but the notion was that the Europeans had a right to take land.
yeah. But it wasn't just that 1844 election where it started. It goes all the way back to John Winthrop in 1630 when he wrote that City on the Hill sermon that he delivered before he even set sail in Europe, talking about the shining city on the hill. That this was our right, this was our God-given right to come across the Atlantic and take over. So it grew over time, I can imagine. I'm going to do a little more homework on it myself because this picture alone says volumes in a way. David says he's used it a lot over the years. This is the first time I've used it. If I were to redo this program again, I'd put this image in